Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and welcome back to my continuing interview series of CSM candidates. If you're listening to this just after the video has come out, then you should know that on Monday, the voting for the next Council of Stellar Management will start. And this election will determine who is on the player representative body, which actually flies out to Iceland and meets with CCP in person in order to help give feedback from the player base to CCP directly, and also work under an NDA in order to allow CCP to better develop new features.
My name's Matthew Dust. I'm the CEO of the Valkyrie Tribe. I do Mimitar Faction Warfare. I run the Faction Warfare committee on Discord, and basically our goal as a collective is to make proposals to bring to the CSM and CCP and try and fix faction warfare. One of the reasons I'm running for CSM is to make sure that those proposals get to CCP and faction warfare gets the much needed love it deserves.
So one of the first sessions that the CSM will typically have at a summit is a meeting with the upper leadership of EVE Online's development team. And typically during this meeting, the CSM as a whole has tried to present a small list of 3 to 4 points during this meeting. What is a point that you feel that you could convince the rest of the CSM deserves to be presented during this meeting? I personally have spent 3 years on the council, and now that I'm coming off of my final term, I'm taking the time to interview candidates who I think have a decent chance of being elected into CSM 14. But that's enough about the election and myself. Let's let the candidate of the day introduce themselves.
For me, it's not necessarily new player experience so much as new player immersion. When the new players come in to the game, uh, they're not necessarily immersed into New Eden so much as they are immersed into somebody else's idea of what New Eden is. And I think CCP could go a long way establishing a more cinematic approach to the lore and actually, creating NPCs that people care about. Like, for example, other games you can actually name an NPC, whereas Eve Online, I'm willing to bet most of the developers and players have a very hard time naming anyone other than Aura.
Jamil Surum?
Right.
No,
The
I
Empress.
genuinely contest that. I'm sorry. I don't agree with that.
I mean, I know Jamil Surum and I know Empress Katiz, but I mean, like, could you pick them out of a lineup? Like, you know them by name. Could you pick them out of a lineup, and how much relevance do they have to?
Sorry, you cut out there? How much
I
relevance
said
do they have to the... and then you cut out.
new player. How much relevance do they have to the new player in the grand? How many new players? If you were to go into rookie help and ask new players right now, do you know who Jamil Surum is? You don't know who Jamil Surum is? It's kind of like not mainstream knowledge, and for the empires to have these people, I think it should be, and I think it's good for more immersive gameplay.
Could you surmise this point more specifically and go into detail on what you hope that CCP would do, or something that CCP could improve on in order to increase new player immersion, as you put it?
I guess I would say a cinematic approach to the lore.
Okay. Do you think that's something that you're reasonably going to be able to get CCP to pivot towards as a member of the CSM?
If they use the footage for their trailers, I think it'll help a little bit more. But I honestly think you need a story to hook new players. You can't just say, "Here's a game, good luck," when everybody's out to get you. It's literally you versus the world until you meet a friend. And I think a cinematic approach gets the player hooked on the story.
So one of the ways that CCP has tried to get feedback on what individual CSM members perceive as problems within the game is asking them to present 3 different things that they perceive as problem mechanics or problem areas that CCP would gain a lot out of working on. What are the first 3 mechanics that come to mind for you as areas of the game that CCP would gain from iterating on?
I think faction warfare and low sec in general. are things that CCP need to work on. A side project called Project Nova, which has gone dark, I think needs to be worked on in transparency a little. I know a lot of people from the Dust Veterans Discord. They're hanging on a thread with hope for that game, and I know a lot of other people have just kind of like given up on it. So I think give a little transparency, release the alpha, and get some feedback from the community.
Do you think that managing Nova or dealing with the Nova community is a part of the CSM's job?
I don't know. I know there's no Council of Stellar, or sorry, Council of Planetary Management anymore. So I don't know how much feedback the CSM has with Nova. I assume if they're going for the one universe, one war, I I think at the very least they should get feedback from the CSM. If their idea is to create a standalone game, then that's a different subject altogether.
For
But
reference, CCP has publicly stated that it's going to be a standalone game multiple times.
right, but then they come back from Vegas and they say, "Oh, we we want to realize the dream of one universe, one war," and we're post.
You cut out again.
Like, I believe it was Dopamine that after they didn't release the alpha as promised, he said something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, uh, that they realize that they need to go more on the one universe, one war. So I think they got the feedback from I believe it was E Vegas, and they decided, hey, we need more feedback. We don't have the one universe, one war down, and something's totally missing from the game. So I do think if they are gonna do the one universe, one war, and connect it with Eve. Eve is real. This is the dream. This is the vision for the company connecting the two games. That they do need to include the CSM.
So what's your third thing? You've mentioned faction warfare, Nova. What's the third thing?
I mean, if I could be honest, not to quote Game of Thrones or anything, but kind of break the wheel. I mean, I personally can't speak for every problem in New Eden, and I think that's one of the issues with the CSM is not everyone can speak for every problem in New Eden. And so rather than getting a big nullsec block into the CSM, I think they should change the CSM style and kind of find players who are specialized in their specific area. Like you're running for this position. I understand that, many nullsec corps have alt groups, but still, I think it's a better pitch.
That wasn't really a pitch. Can you go into more detail on what you're suggesting there?
Right. So right now the CSM is just like anybody runs, and it's usually a majority of the CSM is taken up by nullsec, and so people outside of nullsec often on Reddit, Facebook forums, etc. They say, "Oh, they only care about goons, 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 goons," because they have the most players, etc. Well, not the most players, but they have a lot of players and a lot of pull, and they always get elected to the board. So rather than say, "Hey, this is everybody running," this is running for low sec, this is running for faction warfare, this is running for, and there's only one slot open for nullsec, faction warfare, wormhole, or maybe two slots, something along those lines.
So, in my opinion, an important part of being a member of the CSM is being able to explain gameplay patterns or uses of mechanics that feel broken to CCP in order to explain why you think that there's something that's not healthy for the game. Can you describe something that you have experience with that you perceive to be broken, or at the least overpowered, and explain why it is overpowered or broken in your view?
From my experience in faction warfare, things that are broken is ventures deplexing, and one of the reasons why is it's very, very low risk, very high reward, and it's so easy. Even if you do manage to kill a venture, which can see you coming on D-scan from a mile away, in anything except the large plex, even if you do manage to kill it, they often have more ventures staged in a system, and they just go deplex more and more and more. And I think that's pretty broken. I think the ban on warp core stabs was a good move, but I think having warp core strengthened ships was a pretty big loophole that was kind of forgotten about.
So the CSM has to give input on many things, even on things that are normally thought of as coming under the CSM's purview, such as UI design. In fact, a meeting with the UI team, Team Psycho Sisters, is a part of most summits. As such, can you describe a part of the UI that you interact with heavily and identify a problem with it when used in the way that you operate it?
So for me, the faction warfare map is terrible. I think everybody uses the third party system. When you open the faction warfare window, everyone's kind of like, I don't understand, why are all these blobs? It's just a bunch of dots, and it doesn't really make sense. And then you look at the contested stuff. I do like the new agency that just came out. I do like the new faction warfare, but that was one of the things I had a problem with before, and they changed it UI wise with my interaction. I also think as a CEO, the the corp user interface is kind of outdated.
You cut out again?
The corp UI, as from a CEO's perspective, I think it's a little outdated, and there could be a lot.
Okay.
It could be something as simple as like you hover over like specific roles, and it gives I don't believe it does at the moment.
You're talking about adding
Gives like a
tooltips?
specific, yeah, something like a tooltip where it actually tells you what the role is, because you have to actually Google some of them, like what is this and what can they use, what do they have access to. If I give them, not all of it's like self-evident.
So it's less about the UI then and more about the presentation of information within the client that you have problem with there. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, I guess that's probably a perfect way of putting
Okay.
it. Like I don't know exactly how to phrase that. I guess I the user interface could be displayed better and the information better presented. That's, yeah.
Now, monetization is often a dirty word within the player base. However, as a CSM member, it's something that is important to understand. If you had to draw a red line that you wouldn't want to see CCP step over, where would that be, and what arguments would you make against it?
Buying ships outright, I would be against that. And anything that takes away from the industry of New Eden, and you could just purchase it with cash.
Okay.
Absolutely 100% against that. Like, oh, I'm gonna buy a Titan with cash money. I'm absolutely.
Okay. What would your argument be against it?
That is effectively like pay to win, and it ruins the in-game economy. It ruins people's all the players' investments. It's just, I think it's horrible. I don't know how else to explain it. I think it's a very bad idea to let the designers say, hey, you can buy this ship with your in-game money. I'm fine with the subscriptions. I'm fine with players buying Plex and selling it on the market so other people can subscribe, and then using that is to buy something that's on the market that another player built and invested in. So there's the economy works. But if players can just buy stuff from CCP like ships, then the economy is broken and there's no point in doing any industry whatsoever. It would essentially destroy the in-game economy.
What do you plan to do on the CSM to differentiate yourself from the other members?
So, similar to the faction warfare Discord, I plan on creating a similar Discord um, where heads of communities, kind of like a faction warfare, well-known representatives, would propose ideas, and anybody would be able to join and participate in the discussion the same way that I run the faction warfare committee right now. It's just that everything would be specialized, and the people who lead the committees would present to me proposals that I would try and fight tooth and nail to bring to CCP as best as I can, even if it's just like, hey, look at this PowerPoint presentation I emailed you that I couldn't bring up at the summit or at the minutes. I really feel player representation is important, but I believe it needs the support of the community behind it. And I think committees for example, is one way of doing that that I think is really effective. It's essentially a focus, and that focus group provides, they hash it out beforehand, and they really go in depth with the proposals, and they list who it affects and what's its intended purpose, and discuss what negative outcomes might happen from it. And then when we argue the case to CCP later on, I think the proposals will be stronger, and the change that is wanted by the players might be easier to implement
Okay, that's
without
awesome.
any mistakes afterwards.
So effectively, you'd be talking about running your own player-run focus group on whatever topics you feel need the most attention.
Well, it's not whatever topics I feel need the most attention. It's whatever topics players in as a whole. Because, like I said, I'm not an expert on things like wormhole, and I have a little experience with soft mechanics and nullsec warfare, but not everything in the game. Obviously, I enjoy PvP, but I think it's really important to hear what everybody from the community is saying, and to kind of gather those specific groups together and hash out a good discussion and proposals that should be brought to CCP. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily ideas that I feel only ideas that I feel are relevant, because I don't know what the problems are right now in many aspects of gameplay. And by allowing those people who do know what the problems are to talk amongst each other and propose things and get the support of their community, and then make a case for it, then I can take that and bring it to CCP.
Okay. So this one is very simple. Sorry. So this is my final directed question. What other non-incumbent candidate would you most like to see elected alongside yourself or in place of yourself, were it to come to that?
What other candidate would I like elected?
A non-incumbent, so someone who's not been elected.
Not been elected. Okay. My first choice would have been Steve, but since he was on the CSM already, I think my second choice would be Stitch Kanelan. He's part of the Faction Warfare Discord, and he participates it, even though he's not Faction Warfare himself. He participates in the dialogue and the conversations that go on there, and I think he would. I've actually spoken with him. He would advocate the use of the proposals that we present to him in the Faction Warfare Committee. So I think Stitch would be my number two.
Okay, thank you. Well, with all that said, I'd like to just give you a few final moments to make any remarks you'd like to make with regards to anything and just really put a full stop on why you think the listeners should vote for you.
I'm going to be completely honest and say the truth. I don't have a huge amount of experience with the game in the many play styles, but I am going to, if elected, do the best I can to represent and listen to those communities from all the different play styles and present the proposals that they make to CCP, and not just my own proposal. That's my final statement. If you vote for me, I promise I will do my best to represent.
Alright, well, thank you very much for your time.